Have you ever been on a plane when it's hit by a strong crosswind? Or when it runs straight into a storm? And what if the engines suddenly fail? Well, that's about the last thing you'd ever want to experience. And we hope you never do. Still, whenever something goes wrong mid-flight, pilots have to summon incredible skill and effort to steady the aircraft and land it safely, without any loss of life. In this video, we've gathered some of the most extreme airline landings, moments that, against all odds, ended in success. Smoke cloud. The Boeing 747 was scheduled for a routine long-haul flight from London to Auckland, New Zealand, with several stops along the way in India, Malaysia, and Australia. But just minutes after its night departure from Kuala Lumpur, something ominous began to happen. The cabin suddenly filled with smoke, and the cockpit windows lit up with flickering sparks. Pilots know this phenomenon as St. Elmo's fire. It can sometimes be seen dancing on the wings during a thunderstorm, but the weather radar showed no sign of one. Within moments, a shimmering white glow engulfed the entire aircraft, and passengers could see flames shooting from all four engines. To everyone's horror, they all failed. The first officer and flight engineer tried again and again to restart them, but nothing worked. It seemed like all hope was lost. And then, a genuine miracle happened. At an altitude of 13,500 feet, the fourth engine suddenly roared back to life, followed one by the others. The plane managed to reach Jakarta Airport and land safely. All 248 passengers and 15 crew members disembarked unharmed on an island shaken by an erupting volcano. The cause of it all? A massive cloud of volcanic ash that the aircraft had flown straight into. Pilot overboard. It's hard to imagine a second person in the world who's ever taken a ride on the roof of a plane. Veteran pilot Tim Lancaster, with over 11,000 flight hours, was captain of an aircraft bound from the UK to Spain in 1990. At 7:20 a.m., the plane departed Birmingham Airport and headed toward the sunny destination. Just 13 minutes later, the aircraft had climbed to 16,000 feet. The captain loosened his seat belt, and then it happened. A deafening bang. The windshield on his side blew out, and the pilot himself was sucked straight out after it. By sheer luck, his legs got caught inside the cockpit, while the rest of his body was slammed against the fuselage by the rushing wind. A flight attendant grabbed hold of him with both hands, refusing to let go, while the first officer began an emergency descent and sent out a distress call. And so they flew, with one pilot outside the plane, until they reached the nearest airport for an emergency landing. Frostbitten, with broken arms, but still alive, Tim was rushed to the hospital right after the emergency landing. Remarkably, just 5 months later, he was back at the controls. This extreme ordeal was traced back to a mechanic who had replaced the windshield the night before. He'd used the wrong bolts, off by barely a millimeter. Still, not even the boldest Hollywood stuntmen have pulled off something like this. Well, maybe Tom Cruise. The plane without a nose. This is a story of unbelievable heroism. As we all know, most aviation incidents statistically happen during takeoff and landing. The reasons can vary: strong crosswinds, a flock of birds striking the engines, and so on. But who would think that something as small as hail could endanger a massive aircraft made of metal? Well, here's how. On July 27, 2017, in Istanbul, Ukrainian pilot Oleksandr Akapov carried out a heroic landing of a passenger jet belonging to a Turkish airline at Ataturk Airport. The aircraft, with a Ukrainian crew, had taken off from Istanbul bound for Irkin in northern Cyprus. But at 4,000 feet, hail smashed the plane's nose section and shattered the cockpit windshield. The captain and crew made the decision to return. On board were 121 passengers and 6 crew members. The captain landed the plane completely blind, looking only through a tiny side window. Absolutely incredible. When he did it, the entire apron at Ataturk Airport broke into applause. Pilots from other aircraft flashed their landing lights in salute, and came aboard just to shake Alexander's hand. We believe this was truly worthy of respect. The Gimli glider. That's the unusual nickname given to an Air Canada Boeing 767 that once pulled off a truly unbelievable feat. This 132-ton airliner, with both engines completely dead, managed to glide down from 40,000 feet and land safely on an abandoned air base in Gimli, right in the middle of a car race packed with spectators. The situation was nothing short of catastrophic. With no engines running, the plane had almost no electrical power, and most of the cockpit instruments went dark. Hydraulic pressure was dropping so fast that the pilots could barely move the ailerons and rudders. Their chances of survival were almost zero. And yet, the crew showed incredible calm and skill. The captain brought the massive jet down without thrust, touching down on a crumbling runway that hadn't been maintained for years. The aircraft skidded past cars and people, narrowly missing disaster. In the end, no one on board and no one on the ground lost their lives. The cause of this nightmare? A simple fueling error back in Ottawa. The ground crew had confused kilograms with pounds. Instead of the required 20 tons of fuel, the jet left with less than 5. Only sheer luck, the captain's knowledge of an old airfield nearby, and the crew's outstanding airmanship saved 69 souls in the sky and hundreds more on the ground. Plane without a roof. Sometimes the most terrifying adventures don't happen in movies. They happen in the sky. Passengers aboard a Boeing 737 once experienced something truly unforgettable. They had to descend from over 7 kilometers in altitude, in a plane with no roof, icy wind blasting their faces, and the roar of the engines at 530 kilometers per hour. The short flight between the Hawaiian cities of Hilo and Honolulu was supposed to last only 35 minutes. But 23 minutes after takeoff, just as the aircraft reached cruising altitude, a deafening bang shook the cabin, followed by explosive decompression. The roof of the plane above the first 6 rows was ripped away, and the cockpit door was torn off its hinges. Passengers suddenly found themselves under the open sky at a temperature of minus 45 degrees Celsius. They hadn't yet unfastened their seatbelts after the plane reached altitude, and that simple fact saved their lives. The flight attendants, however, were thrown violently around the cabin by the rushing air. The captain immediately began an emergency descent, fighting to keep the damaged aircraft steady at over 500 kilometers per hour. 11 minutes later, he managed to land the Boeing safely, with only one engine still running. Incredibly, every passenger and crew member survived. This shocking event later became known as the Aloha Airlines Flight 243 disaster. Belly landing. On November 1st, 2011, a Boeing 767 operated by the Polish airline lot was on a flight from New York to Warsaw. During the journey, it became clear that the aircraft's hydraulic system had failed, making it impossible to lower the landing gear. The crew had no choice but to prepare for an emergency belly landing. To minimize the risk of fire or explosion, the pilots kept the plane circling over Warsaw for about an hour, burning off as much fuel as possible before attempting to land without landing gear. In the end, thanks to the crew's professionalism and calm under pressure, the landing went smoothly, and all 231 people on board survived without injury. The event later became known as one of the most skillful and heroic emergency landings in aviation history. Landing gear problem. On September 21st, 2005, an Airbus A320 was forced to make an emergency landing at Los Angeles International Airport due to a malfunction of the nose landing gear, which was turned at a right angle. During the landing, the captain kept the nose of the aircraft raised for as long as possible to prevent the nose gear from collapsing. For the same reason, the reverse thrust and aerodynamic brakes were not used. In other words, the aircraft landed without braking, as the pilots had no way of knowing how the nose gear would behave upon touching down on the runway. landing on the Hudson. It may sound strange, but sometimes a single duck, or any other bird, can be enough to bring down an airplane. It's extremely rare, but here's one such case. Passengers on a flight from New York to Seattle had to experience an emergency water landing on the Hudson River after an Airbus A320 struck a flock of Canada geese. Less than a minute after takeoff, the plane began to shake, and passengers saw flames shooting out of the engines. The geese sucked into the turbines, disabled both engines. The captain reported a bird strike to air traffic control and declared an emergency. Seconds later, it became clear he wouldn't be able to keep the aircraft airborne or reach a runway. The only risky but possible option to save the 150 people on board was to land on the Hudson. And that's exactly what he did. Thanks to the incredible professionalism of the crew, the landing was successful, and the shaken but alive passengers climbed out onto the wings of the floating plane to wait for rescue boats. Close call. On July 5, 2014, a Boeing 767 flying from Moscow was approaching Barcelona airport for landing. Just as the aircraft was about to touch down, an Airbus A340 belonging to Aerolíneas Argentinas unexpectedly rolled onto the runway. The Boeing pilots, spotting the danger in time, immediately pulled up to avoid a collision. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss new and interesting videos.